Today we'll talk about a very tricky thing that has to do with reflexive verbs. So let's take a look. Let's take the reflexive verb sich gönnen. Now you might not know what this means. Sich gönnen is to treat oneself, to do something nice for yourself, like have a nice meal, a massage, something nice for yourself. So, if you use this in a sentence, would it be ich gönne mich eine Pizza or ich gönne mir eine Pizza? Now, 80% of German learners would say mich because the sich looks very similar to the mich, and usually reflexive pronouns we use in the accusative case. This one would be ich gönne mir eine Pizza. It's a very common problem, a very common mistake. In this video, I'll show you how to avoid this mistake. Let's take a look. So, first of all, it's true that these reflexive pronouns, they most of the time are used in the accusative case. Mich, dich, sich, uns, euch, sich. They are very similar, by the way, to the personal pronouns in the accusative case. Only the two sichs are different. So the sich for the third person singular and the sich for the third person plural. The other forms are the same as the personal pronoun accusative forms. So for the dative, they're quite similar actually, only the first two are different. Mir, dir, sich, uns, euch, sich. Again, they're mostly the same as the dative personal pronouns, except for the sich and the sich. If you compare these two reflexive pronouns, accusative and dative, they are again the same, apart from the first two, mich versus mir and dich versus dir. So what I'm showing you today will only be relevant if you have the reflexive pronoun in the first person singular, mich, mir, or the second person singular, dich, dir. But first of all, what does reflexive mean? So first of all, this one is not reflexive. Ich sehe Anna. I see Anna, or I can see Anna. Here we have two different people. We have the ich, the subject, and then there's the verb sehen, and then we have the object, and it's another person. Two people. This one person on the left-hand side, and then we have Anna. On the right-hand side, we have another example with sehen, same verb. This time it's ich sehe mich im Spiegel. I see myself in the mirror. And that's an example for a reflexive verb, because here the subject ich and the object mich, they refer to the same person. We have a mirror, there's only one person, so in this case it's reflexive. Okay, so most reflexive verbs, again, I'm repeating myself here, are used in the accusative case, or rather the reflexive pronouns will be used in the accusative case. So whenever in doubt, use these reflexive pronouns in the accusative case. And in English, it's, by the way, very similar to myself, yourself, himself, herself, except in English, reflexive verbs are quite rare. For example, introduce oneself. Let me introduce myself. I introduce myself. It's reflexive. But these verbs are quite rare in English and they're super common in German. So, accusative, most verbs, like sich interessieren für. So, ich interessiere mich für klassische Musik. I'm interested in classical music. Next sentence is sich anziehen, reflexive and also separable verb. You can see the line between the an, the prefix, and the ziehen, the verb stem. Zieht sich jetzt an. He's getting dressed now. So, sich anziehen means to get dressed, to put on clothes. Again, it's sich, and the sich actually could be dative or accusative, as you know from the table a couple of slides ago, but this is accusative. If this was first person singular, it would have been ich ziehe mich jetzt an. Okay, great. The next verb is sich erinnern an, to remember something. Erinnerst du dich, accusative, dich, erinnerst du dich noch an unseren Urlaub in Antalya? Do you still remember our holiday in Antalya? Nice place in southern Turkey. Sich duschen, to take a shower or to have a shower. Bitte dusch dich nach dem Fußballtraining. Please take a shower after the football training, otherwise you will stink. Again, accusative, dich. Not dir, not dative, dich. If you're serious about learning German, you should definitely check out my 27-hour-long Beginners A1 course. Join over 1,000 students that master the A1 German level with me. All details down below. It's the first link in the video description. Sich ausruhen, to rest or to get some rest. Ich ruhe mich nach dem Mittagessen aus. I'm taking some rest after lunch. Ich ruhe mich, accusative. So we've seen that these reflexive verbs, they are usually used with reflexive pronouns in the accusative case. So whenever you're not sure, use the accusative case. But in some cases, it's reflexive, but the dative case. Like in the first example of this video, ich gönne mir eine Pizza. I'm treating myself to a pizza. So this is only relevant for the first and second person singular, so mir and dir, because the other forms, as we've seen in the two tables, are the same. They coincide with the accusative reflexive pronouns. So when do we need the dative case? I'll show you some examples now, and maybe you can come up with the rule before I tell you the rule. So, sich die Hände waschen. Ich wasche mir die Hände. I'm washing my hands. Sich etwas kaufen. Du kaufst dir ein neues Auto. You're buying yourself or you're buying for yourself a new car. Or just you're getting a new car. You don't always have to translate these reflexive pronouns to English. Sometimes it makes more sense to just ignore them when translating, right? Sich etwas gönnen. That's the verb that we've seen on the first slide, to treat yourself to something. Warum gönnst du dir nie etwas? Du bist zu sparsam. Why do you never buy something nice for yourself? Why do you never treat yourself? You're too economical, or you don't like spending money. Okay, so the last example is sich etwas vorstellen, to imagine something. Ich kann mir nicht vorstellen, wie es wäre, Deutschlands Bundeskanzler zu sein. I cannot imagine, again dative, ich kann mir nicht vorstellen. I cannot imagine what it would be like to be the Chancellor of Germany. So I'm sure you've seen the rule here. The rule is that whenever you have another accusative object in the sentence, like here, die Hände, so if there's another object, the reflexive pronoun cannot be in the accusative as well. There cannot be two accusative forms, with the exception of only 3, 4, 5 verbs. So usually in German what we have is we have an accusative object, in this case die Hände, and then the second object is usually a person, usually in the dative case. In our scenario, it's reflexive, but the same applies to non-reflexive verbs, something like ich zeige dir mein Haus. I'm showing my house to you. So one thing is a thing, usually accusative, and the other thing is a person in the dative case. And in this case, it's reflexive because it's the same person that we have in the subject. Ich wasche mir die Hände. Du wäschst dir die Hände. In the other examples, we have ein neues Auto, accusative object, and then we don't have dich, we have dir. In these cases, we need the reflexive pronoun in the dative case. In the last example, ich kann mir nicht vorstellen, wie es wäre, Deutschlands Bundeskanzler zu sein. I cannot imagine what it would be like to be Germany's chancellor. In this case, the accusative object is not a single word, but the whole subclause, wie es wäre, Deutschlands Bundeskanzler zu sein. This takes over the function of what usually would be an accusative object. In this case, we also need the reflexive pronoun in the dative case. The last example was a bit advanced, but memorize things like ich wasche mir die Hände. Most typical example here. Ich wasche mir die Hände. Die Hände, accusative, so we cannot have mich, we need dir. So, do you know any other verbs where we need the reflexive pronouns to be in the dative case? Let us know down below and I'll see you next week in the next video.